Finally, after much anticipation, River City Gals is here, an in-universe sequel of sorts to the classic River City Ransom on NES, otherwise known as Downtown Neketsu Monogatari in Japan, which is the third entry in the Kunio-kun series. Here, instead of playing as Kunio and Riki, you play as their girlfriends, Kyoko and Misako. Basically, it's a gender-reversed version of the earlier games, if it wasn't obvious. The story starts off with our heroines in detention, being the troublemakers they are, before receiving a threatening and foreboding text about their boyfriend's kidnapping.
What is it, Kyoko? Riki and Kunio! They've been kidnapped!
Without a moment to lose, our two River City Gals jump into action and venture off on a quest across town to save their hunky lovers. The story starts off incredibly strong, with fun animation styles, some of the stylings of manga panels, then some that are short, albeit sweet and fully animated cutscenes to get the story rolling. We get a good sense of what both our main protagonists are like, with Kyoko being a love-struck airhead and Misako being the overly aggressive one of the pair, even though she's the one that keeps them on track. The jokes about their archetypes usually land fairly well, with Kyoko being the clothing and shopping excess goofball, and Misako being the slightly more grounded of the two of them, even if she does want to solve all her problems with her fists. I do like how committed they are to their loves, and the fact that they trek across the entire city fighting hundreds of enemies and strong gang leaders just to save their obnoxiously nicknamed boyfriends. The beginning of the game gives you a feeling like the plot is actually going to have a tight grasp on how the story moves along. Nope. You're not going to get that here. Instead, you're going to be thrown on a wild goose chase across River City, and after each boss will be told the same thing, that your boyfriends are in a different castle, and that you'll need to go talk to another person who might know about them. But like clockwork, of course the next person you talk to doesn't. Neither does the next person until the very end of the game. I wouldn't mind seeing the goose chase if there was at least some sort of progression, but here it feels sort of meandering, as nothing really advances or happens. When you aren't searching for your boyfriends, you'll be doing side quests that have you travel all over the part of town you are in to do something. Outside of giving you an item or XP, they don't really progress the story as far as I could tell, and I usually only did these if for some reason I was near them in the area. Well, okay, there are a few fetch quests that you have to do to continue the main story, but I'm talking about the side objectives given to you by the worst character in the entire game. I'm not going to spoil it, but I personally wasn't too big a fan of the goof ending. I think most people will probably be able to guess what it is after the second or third boss, but I'm still not going to say what it is. I will say right now though, I have an odd suspicion that the first ending you get is either a fake or a dream. Throughout the game, supernatural stuff happens, and Mami and Hisabi are always one step ahead of you, claiming that Kunio and Riki are their BFFs. Naturally, if this is true, I will post an update at the end of the video, or at the very least in the comments down below. Now, the normal ending you get after first completing the game could totally just be the normal ending regardless, but by the time I beat my first playthrough, I was just a little bit over 60%, so I have a feeling that there is a true ending for people who play the game a second time over using the new Game Plus feature. Alright, so I loved a good chunk of the side characters in the game. It's just a shame that the best ones only get a few moments of screen time here and there. The few I actually didn't like, unfortunately, take up most of the on-screen presence that the others should have been allotted. Mami and Hisabi are quite literally the only majorly reoccurring side characters I genuinely enjoy. Good thing too, since they are the game's best girls. They come across as jealous, bitter, almost mentally unhinged near yandere type girls, and gosh darn it if I don't love them. Anytime they would show up, it was a real treat to hear what they would have to say, before they sadly vanished right after their small bits of dialogue. Mami and Hisabi also easily had my favorite designs out of all the characters, although that isn't to say some of the other girls' designs weren't great on their own, such as most of the bosses. There were a few other characters who were hinted at having more in-universe story, but they only appeared once and weren't ever mentioned again after that. Kyori just wanted to hang with her friends, but sadly her, along with the other members of the cast that I really liked, lost their time to the next character I have to unfortunately talk about, Godai. Godai is easily one of my biggest complaints about the entire game, outside of how the story progression is handled, and he really does drain a lot of life from the game. He is the creepy red herring of sorts who gives Kyoko and Misako progressively violent and destructive side quests. Not only was each encounter with him grating, but his in-game artwork felt incredibly out of place and overly simple. Another big complaint about Godai leads into the voice acting department. Most of the voice acting in the game is actually fantastic. Well, aside from all the recognizable YouTubers who are sadly here.
My shop welcomes your money.
Hey, welcome to my dojo. Let's enlighten ourselves. Peace be with you.
Get in my dojo and fight me!
I'll never understand hiring well-known YouTubers, especially because they are far from professional voice actors, and almost always take me out of the game I am playing. Although, I guess for most people who aren't me, they would enjoy seeing people they watch in games that they play. All I wish for is a dual language option, but oh well. Honestly, this is where my biggest problem with the voice acting comes in, and that's for Godai, who is voiced by a particularly out-of-place Irish man with an infected eye.
Here's your burger.
Ah, broiled beef of the gods.
I'm never eating fast food again. We got your dumb burger. Now what do you know about Kunio and Ricky?
Boy, that hit the spot. Okay, you mentioned they were talking to someone creepy looking.
No, we didn't, actually. How did you?
Yes, Jacksepticeye voices Godai, and his voice job here makes even the most unfortunate of 90s anime dubs sound really good. I don't have anything against him as a person, he just doesn't fit the role he is given, or even the game's quasi-Tokyo environments. Outside of Sean's voice acting and some other way too obvious cameos, the voice acting was good for the rest of the cast, except that one comic book nerd who thankfully is only in the game twice.
Cosmic Mega Babes? Yeah, but they only had the standard edition cover. Ugh. I could barely bring myself to read it 3 times.
Again, props to Mami and Hisabe along with the rest of the female characters and Kunio and Ricky when they show up. Another neat thing is that at certain points of the game, Kyoko and Misaku would talk about what is going on in the story so far. When they would do this, their portraits would actually move and talk, which was a lot more fun than having static portraits. Some of the dialogue was actually legitimately funny and had me laughing hard.
But you don't even go to this school.
Shut up! I'm trying to earn extra money! Don't act like you're smarter than me. I've been in high school for 7 years. Ain't nobody smarter at school stuff than Masuzu!
You girls are all the same.
We look nothing alike.
So what are you two supposed to be?
Girls?
High schoolers?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
We were. A long time ago.
What's happening?
It's a flashback. No one cares, Yamada.
We were just kids then.
And other times, it had me cringing. The cringe was mainly Godai and the comic geek, but other jokes here and there could sometimes drag. Not often, but it did happen. I guess since I talked about the voice acting, I should cover the rest of the sound next. The soundtrack was phenomenal. Not a single track of either the lyrical or instrumental tracks sounded bad to listen to. It was all literal music to my ears, and each of the songs fit the stages and battles well. The mall theme was probably my favorite track out of the entire game vocally.
Can you feel me coming? Heart beating tight. Keep on moving. Hunting until you're mine.
And that's a tough feat to accomplish when it was all so good. Before we move on to the core of the game, that being the gameplay, let's talk about how incredible the animation art here is. There's a good variety of sprites with multiple enemy types that get introduced over the course of the game. None of the environments look the same, and each screen is different from the last. Everything on screen was colorful, vibrant, and just fluid as heck. I adored all the different character portraits for important characters, with the exception of Godai, and all I could really wish for is alternative outfits for the playable characters. Although, seeing the references to past games in the series and other games in the arcade was pretty cool. I was surprised and genuinely happy with how many cutscenes there were in the game. There was the OP, the manga-styled cutscenes, and each boss introduction was a cutscene. They all look top quality, and it honestly just makes me wish this would get an OVA adaptation. The levels you fight your way through are all very different, but feel connected and real for the most part. From the school gates, to the mall strip, to the downtown and the docks, and loads of other areas, there's plenty of game world to explore. There is thankfully a fast travel system of sorts that revolves around the bus stops, allowing you to transfer to different hub areas. There are also stores scattered around the world where you can buy healing items and different equipment. However, when you do buy from a store, you don't know what each thing will do until after you buy it and try it. I was really glad to see that you could stock up on healing items for boss battles though. That was a really nice touch. The game is a traditional beat 'em up. You go around fighting increasingly challenging enemies whose numbers grow more and more as the game goes on. The combat in the game is incredibly solid 90% of the time, as you use your fists, legs, and randomly assorted weapons laying around, as long as you aren't trying to summon an ally to come help you in battle with their special ability. More on that in a second. You have your basic punches and combos by mashing the X button, and the Y button allows you to do heavier moves that can sometimes stun your enemies or knock them down quickly. Also, at level 7, one of your Y moves becomes the greatest video game attack ever, the ability to dab. In certain environments around the game, you can find melee weapons or throwable objects that you can pick up and beat the ever-living snot out of your enemies. Naturally, these weapons do break after a while, but using the baseball bat and other things lying around was really fun and mixed up the combat enough from just using your fist and legs. As you level up, more powers and stuff is unlocked for you to perform and use. You level up, naturally, by completing missions and beating up people for XP. You can also buy power-ups from dojos in the city. You gain money through the previously stated missions and fights. I love seeing stacks of dollars fly out of enemies when they were defeated, and it was great that the bills and coins were all different colors. You can also get special attacks later on in the game that drain your SP meter, a meter that I didn't even realize existed until I was made aware of it after buying a special move. You perform special moves with your B button. Characters level up independently from each other, sort of. While leveling for the character you aren't playing as isn't at the same rate, they still get a bit of XP as you play as the other character. Another minor thing, but one that is really frustrating the few times it comes up, is the platforming you have to do. It's only a few select times, but let me tell you, I dreaded it due to the perspective of the camera and how the controls felt stiff when trying to land. Thankfully, you only lose a little bit of health when you fall in a pit instead of an instant kill, but the recovery takes a few moments. Game overs here are actually handled really well. Instead of making you restart the entire stage or working off a live system, you instead just lose some coins and restart the room that you died in or right before the boss. Now, quick thing about the controls, I couldn't figure out how to make them work via the keyboard, only the gamepad. I did find out that the space bar allows you to close your cell phone, but that was about it, since the keys didn't let me interact with the phone itself. The girls' cell phones are essentially the menu of the game, consisting of your average things like the map, your inventory and status screen, and information on enemies, recruit, and allies. Yep, if you defeat all the enemies in a screen except one, and they were knocked down before this happened, you sometimes have the ability to spare them and have them become an assist attack. This is easier said than done, however, since no matter how much I tried, the only button worked a quarter of the time I pressed it, and I promise it isn't my controller being weird. The enemies you do recruit essentially become special attacks that you can summon, but they do have their own health bar instead of a usage meter. They will still have to recharge until their next attack before you can use them though. If they die from too many hits or you die, you'll need to recruit a new ally. Sadly, you can only have one at a time. Enemies come in different varieties, such as the normal student, the cheerleaders and punks, the Yakuza, and even a Terminator knockoff with Arnie-like noises. The worst enemy for sure is the sledgehammer guys, followed by the Terminator-like enemies. I managed to recruit everyone else on my first playthrough except the sledgehammer guys. They hit hard and they were just a pain. The bosses were all incredibly varied and unique, although I would be lying if I said I enjoyed fighting all of them. There was a boss that took on the form of a bullet hell-like shooter game, and another that was like Guitar Hero, but while the gimmicks were neat in theory, they just weren't too fun in practice, slowing the game down a lot. I often just preferred when the bosses were more standard. The game is a mix of an open environment that you can go back and explore leisurely at your pleasure, but the new environments you need to progress through are locked linearly. You don't find new ways around the map. Instead, the game unlocks paths as you progress. You can always go back and revisit previous areas for the shops and to see if you missed any collectibles, along with the ability to grind for coins and leveling up. Yep, enemies constantly spawn in any new area you enter, which is good if you need some cash for missions or to buy items. There is a drawback to this, however, and that's the fact that if you need to run back to the store for healing items, you can also lose health before the boss since there are pitfalls and enemies galore. One of the small problems I had with the map was even though it displayed that there were stores and other objectives in the area, it wouldn't show in the area where they were, just saying, yeah, they were here. It's a little thing, but it's still annoying nonetheless. I sadly didn't have anyone to try out the 2-player mode with, but it's really nice that you have the option of turning on and off friendly fire mode. After you beat the game, you gain the ability to play as some certain characters, which I think is really cool, along with the fact there is a new game plus mode. And with all that said, how do I ultimately feel about River City Gals? Well, I enjoyed it. For the most part. It's a solid game that I feel would be a lot more fun played in chunks rather than just one long sitting like I did. I also feel that playing with a friend would also add a lot to the fun factor and the experience overall. The game definitely has some major flaws here and there, but those are mostly story and voice acting related. I don't really think these will bother too many people outside of myself or people like me, but they are still problems I personally had with the game and felt needed to be addressed. However, I know some people might not care about skipping cutscenes, or at least the scenes with characters they might not like like at the very least, so there are ways to get past the annoyances. And hey, if you like these YouTubers and enjoy their roles, that's fine. This is just my personal opinion on how I felt the voice acting was handled. The few gameplay problems are annoying, but they aren't game-breaking. Past these things here and there, the rest of the game is extremely solid with a good deal of content on offer. As long as you make sure to take breaks, you'll have a good time. Fans of beat-em-ups will definitely enjoy the gameplay here, and newcomers will enjoy the easy to get into gameplay, even if it does become a bit more challenging near the end of the game. All in all, I did enjoy the game and recommend those interested in it check it out. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider checking out the rest of my content on my channel or sharing the video with a friend. If you want to support the channel, I have my Patreon linked in the description below. A huge thank you to the show's patrons Gemstar Gold and Project Nova, and another huge thank you to Way Forward for sending me an early review copy of the game. Their Twitter will be linked in the description below. If anyone has any recommendations or comments, please let me know as I read everything you guys post. Until next time, this is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya guys!